Managing Board, Mr. Ernest Khosa, the CEO of SACAA, Ms. Poppy Khoza, COO of AXA, Fundi Sitele, and we also have other board members from the Civil Aviation Authority in our midst. I greet you all. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, thank you so much for coming through. Much appreciated. It's been an extremely eventful week as far as aviation is concerned. A lot has transpired. A lot of information has been released, some facts, some misconceptions, and we do believe that Minister Fikile Mbalula, as well as the heads of the various entities here present today, will lay to rest some of those issues that have been raised over the past few days. Just by way of disclaimer, colleagues, I'm going to ask that we focus attention today solely on air transportation, matters related to aviation, and also very briefly, in as far as operational matters are concerned, or matters that specifically relate to SAA, please note that the Honorable Minister and the heads of the entities here present will not be able to speak on that. So questions related to South African Airways or any specific operational matters will not be attended to today. Why? Because SAA, of course, is an entity that falls under the Department of Public Enterprises and not transport. But in as much as it affects air transportation, the Minister will be able to speak on those issues. I do thank you. Without much further ado, I'm going to hand over to the Minister. I also know, colleagues, that you will want either hard copy or soft copy of the statement today. That will be made available to you at the end of the address. Honourable Minister, it's over to you, sir.
One, two.
All right, we do apologize for those technical difficulties. I hope the microphone is not being grounded. Colleagues in the AV desk, if you can kindly assist. I'm hearing there is some static also in the speakers that might interfere with the colleague's sound. Are we ready to go?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, the chair of the board of SACAA and the CEO and the COO of AXA present here today, and all members of the board. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming in for this update briefing. With me is Ms. Poppy Khoza, the head of SACAA. I also have Ms. Fundi Sitele, the COO of AXA, and on my right we have the chairperson of SACAA, and these two corporate leaders just finished briefing me on the issues and operations of air travel safety. The airports across the country are maintaining the acceptable standards in terms of their on-time performance after a slight drop on Wednesday this week. Before I venture too far, let me take this opportunity of the October month to recognize the female leaders in aviation business and encourage all women and girls to take up aviation as a field of business and career interest. We still need a lot of pilots, engineers, managers, and thought leaders in transport. On the onset, let me explain who SACAA is. Most of you may refer to SACAA as SAA. The mandate of the South African Civil Aviation Authority is to administer civil aviation safety and security oversight in the Republic of South Africa. This in line with the Civil Aviation Act 2009 and in accordance with the standards and recommended practices prescribed by the International Civil Aviation Organization. The performance of regular aviation safety and security oversight of aircrafts, airlines, and aviation personnel, among others, is done by SACAA, South African Civil Aviation, assisted by other agencies under my ministry in order to fulfill this mandate. The South African Civil Aviation develops regulations that the ministry, the airline operators, is expected to comply with, and in order to assist the industry to comply. The SACAA develops technical guidance, material that demonstrates how the industry can comply to prescribed regulations. The development of regulations in South Africa is a consultative process that includes members of the industry and the public prior to the minister's promulgation of regulations. The SACAA Inspectorate conducts annual renewal inspections and surveillance audits on all operators to determine if operators comply applicable regulations. So the context of you receiving news that either SACAA or either SAA Express or Chem Air is grounded is located in this mandate. The sky and flying business must be safe, and out records of having safety in the skies must be jealously guided by all of us. Now, here too was the execution of this mandate, that the inspection at South African Airways Technical, an approved aircraft maintenance organization, revealed some safety concerns, as I mentioned in the media interview on the 22nd October 2019 in Cape Town. SAT, the South African Airways Technical, referred to as SAT, is itself an internationally rated business, but our role as the Department of Transport is to regulate and monitor. SAT services many airlines, including those that compete with SAA and other international airlines that come to South Africa. Its track record is blemish-free in this aspect, and our work is to assist but verify what they continue to make South Africa proud. When SAA made the pronouncements it did about certain concerns, I'll pause.
Will now be boarding through gate E7 and no longer gate C10, as indicated on some of the boarding passes. Thank you.
It's not grounded. No plane is grounded, Minister.
Yeah, no, that attests that planes are running. Everything is back to normal.
All passengers traveling with FA.
Why did we come here? It did about 10 concerns on parts used by SAT. When SAA made the pronouncements it did about certain concerns on parts used by SAAT, as regulator, SACAA was duty-bound to act. The SACAA audit of SAAT resulted in 5 findings relating to non-compliances with the civil aviation regulations. The SACAA sampled 2 aircraft belong to Mango Airlines and Com Air. Even though the SACAA accepted the corrective action plan submitted by SAT, 2 findings which may affect the entire fleet of the 3 airlines remained a cause for concern for the regulator. It is against this backdrop that the SACAA engaged with the affected airlines to solicit assurance that the rest of the fleet does not display the same deficiencies. The 2 findings related to the unqualified personnel releasing or signing off maintenance work, and secondly, maintenance checks on flight data, recorders and voice recorders that had not been done correctly. Upon discovery of these non-compliances, the steps taken by the SACAA were to direct the Aircraft Maintenance Organization South African Airways Technical and the relevant airlines, namely Mango, Comair and South African Airways, to conduct verification exercises on their fleet to ensure that in terms of these irregularities, their aircraft are indeed airworthy. The airlines were expected to provide written evidence of their findings. The feedback received by the regulator indicates that 25 SAA aircraft, 12 Comair aircraft, and 7 Mango aircraft were affected. The airlines cooperated with the regulator and submitted evidence which the regulator spent the rest of Tuesday and Wednesday evaluating this evidence. The SACAA is in the process of processing the evidence submitted by all the airlines to determine whether it is safe for the airlines to operate the aircraft. The South African Airways Technical, Mango, Comair and South African Airways responded by self-grounding the affected aircraft pending the assessment by the regulator. A question was asked in Cape Town whether South African skies remain safe. South Africa goes through International Civil Aviation Organization's Universal Safety Oversight Audit Program. The responsibility of ensuring that countries apply comparable civil aviation standards is undertaken by ICAO, a specialized United Nations agency comprising 192 member states. South Africa is one of the ICAO member states and must therefore comply with the standards and recommended practices set by ICAO on safety and security. ICAO had conducted its Universal Safety Oversight Audit Program, continuous monitoring approach audit on South Africa in May 2017. The results revealed that South Africa's effective implementation rating had increased from 83.83% in 2013 to the current 87.41%. This rating is significantly higher than the world average of 68.53%. Most importantly, the final ICAO audit report indicates that South Africa did not attract a significant safety concern, SSC, during the audit. The impact of a significant safety concern on a country means that commercial operations will be affected negatively as international and regional airlines will not operate in a country with an SSC. South Africa's results indicated that South Africa's sterling performance resulted in 100% performance in two key audit areas, for instance, legislation and organization. Our country also recorded 100% in the subfield of aviation medicine. South Africa is currently 39 globally and number 2 in Africa. South Africa participates in global aviation discussions and represents the country globally on a number of international aviation bodies. Other than the many roles that South Africa fulfills, the Director of Civil Aviation, on my left, Ms. Poppy Khoza, was recently appointed as the second Vice President of ICAO Council at the agency's 40th Assembly in Montreal, Canada in September 2019. The General Assembly I had an opportunity to attend. The number of aircraft accidents can be used as one of the basic barometers that can indicate the presence or otherwise of the effective administration of civil aviation safety and security oversight in a country. It is worth mentioning that by ensuring maximum compliance with civil aviation regulation, the SACAA has assisted South Africa to retain the impeccable zero fatal accident record in relation to airlines and other scheduled commercial operations. This exemplifies the high standards of aviation safety and security in this sector. SACAA and AXA, together with ATNS, are very important economic entities in our transport ecosystem. Their work largely relies on the tariff system, where our consensus on user pay principle is best practiced. In every flight ticket, there are embedded levies or tariffs that enable these important entities to function. Likewise, other fees apply to operators and other users. The same user pay principle, as we know, has been frowned upon in another area of my focus, our roads. The roads that lead to the airport here are very important for the smooth functioning of the economy and for our social need as a people. Across our system, we have found that the user pay principle is direct, targeted, fairer, and extremely efficient. SACAA and all the entities at the airport make us a world-class country with laws that are internationally accepted. The same should apply on our roads and on our ocean. We need a world-class economy that is able to afford to have such needed services, but we must also agree to pay for that, or else we are destroying rather than building. The issues of corruption in the transport ecosystem must be confronted so that people continue to feel safe and are safe, but also people must feel proud that they are contributing to building the future and building their own country. Corruption robs us of that pride. Hence the resistance we have seen, especially on the roads infrastructure. Communicating with you this way is also a very important matter. Letting South Africans know of SACAA is key to understanding why they may be late, because the airline cancelled a plan due to a technical fault. That cancellation is between your life as a passenger or death. We do it to keep you safe, not to inconvenience you. The lack of proper communications on the roads tariffs, the e-tolls, referred to as the e-tolls, for instance, may have played a role in the slow take-up by our road users. We must correct that, and this is a start. Our roads are congested. Our environment is highly polluted by our cars. We must reduce the amount of cars on the road and build world-class roads that cause efficiency on cars so as to emit less pollutants. Public transport must be a key solution in all of that, together with tolls and other measures. I thought I should use this opportunity to encourage the users to support these entities and be aware that they only act for your best interest. They are our unsung heroes who keep us safe and get us home to our beloved ones. To do that, we pay. I want to emphasize that there is no crisis. This work is routine and normal of SACAA to ground aircrafts or issue prohibition orders. We should not be overly concerned when this happens. However, it is important, if such has to happen in a large scale, it must be communicated so that those who are using means of transport in terms of air don't get to be inconvenienced and not knowing what other plans they may need to undertake where such has to happen. Grounding airlines happen for various reasons at all times. And in this particular instance, this was no exception. And like we have actually said at the beginning, towards our conclusion, it had to happen, as it will be explained by the board and the executive in relation to the events that have happened this particular week, that it is no accident, but at the same time it had to happen, and for what reasons that had to actually happen. And for all important reasons, they are doing what they were created to do, and we must support them in their work. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Minister. Colleagues, we're going to open the floor now for the first round of questions. I see the first hand, the lady in white, if you can come through, then the gentleman and the gentleman back there. Thank you. If you can just give us your name as well as your media company that you represent, that would be great. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Melanie from Bloomberg. I just have a question on if you could provide us with some specifics on what exactly it was that went wrong that affected the entire fleet. I don't know if I missed it, but just if we could just push a bit on that, on the exact thing that went wrong. And just one more thing, there was a reference to corruption in terms of the transport system, and I think it was relating to the e-tolls. Could we just sort of have a clarification also on that? Thanks.
Okay. Thank you so much for that.
Hi, Bohmaj Lulane from EWN. Minister, maybe I got it, I didn't get it because I arrived late, but I just want to understand, if this is routine, it happens all the time, is there not a specific way of doing it so that this panic could be avoided? Because with people panic, then that's when they don't know answers, because they also complain about lack of communication. So I think I'm just asking, is there a way of doing it so that we don't have to be here again? And number two, an expert who spoke to an AWN had said that it's either CAA is dramatic or there's really issue with South African maintenance when it comes to aviation. Is that something you're looking into so that, we can have some clarity on these kind of things? Because I don't think people know a lot about mechanical and technical issues when it comes to aviation. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentleman at the back.
Alex Winning from Reuters News Agency. You mentioned 5 findings. Could we have all 5 findings, please, apart from the 2 that you mentioned? And the second question is, you said that in total there are 44 aircraft that were affected if you put together SAA, Comair and Mango. How many of those aircraft are now back in the air? Thank you.
Thank you. And then one last hand for this round, please. Yes, sir. If we can get the mic to the front. Thank you.
It's Arthur France from African Pilot magazine. This is a very difficult question I'm going to propose to the Minister. Because what do we do when the SACAA itself is non-compliant? And because I walk the ramps and I go throughout the aviation industry, I see many instances of where SACAA inspectors arrive at an air maintenance organization and then start threatening them and asking ridiculous questions. For example, at Lanseria 3 months ago, an inspector wanted to see the gear retraction on a Cessna 208. The Cessna 208 has fixed gear. So there's a big problem in the industry when the very inspectors supposed to be doing the job are not qualified.
Thank you so much for that, Athol. Ladies and gentlemen, let me just also reiterate that the Minister is accompanied by the COO of AXA, Ms. Fundi Sitebe. There's also the CEO of SACAA, Ms. Poppy Koza. They will be fielding some of those questions alongside the board chair, Mr. Ernest Koza. So I'm not sure if now is an opportunity perhaps that we can hear from the ladies and they can respond to some of those technical questions that are there. Ms. Koza, perhaps you can just also speak to address some of the questions that are here, and then Ms. Sitebe, if you can do the same. Minister will then close up and add where the questions refer to his leadership. Thank you. The microphone, the handheld, will be suited in this instance. Thank you.
Thank you, Ayanda. Perhaps let me start with a question that was saying what were the other findings that were picked up in the system. I must indicate that out of the 5 findings, 2 of them were serious, so we deemed them to be serious. The other 3, I would deem them to be administrative in nature, and accordingly, as the Minister did indicate, a corrective action plan was submitted to the South African Civil Aviation Authority, and those findings were closed. They relate to the lapse in quality management system, where we did not have appropriate evidence. The airline subsequently, or the South African Airways Technical subsequently provided adequate information, which indicated that, in fact, those findings were closed. The other one related to the issue of a failure to implement the previously raised findings. And again, upon receiving adequate information, we then confirmed that indeed these findings were closed. But the two, which the Minister did touch on, which we deemed as serious and critical, related to the issue of releasing aircraft to service by inappropriately or inadequately qualified personnel. And the second one related to the issues of the maintenance of flight data recorders as well as the cockpit voice recorders, which were not done in line with the applicable regulations. The aircraft that were affected, as provided by the airlines, were 46, and I must indicate that 40 of those aircraft have been released back to service, having met the required, or rather having been approved by the Civil Aviation Authority after the corrective action plan was submitted and subsequently accepted by the Civil Aviation Authority. The issue that relates, I think the issue was raised by Athol, on what happens if SAA is not compliant. The civil aviation industry is a system. That is why you would have a regulator and then you would have operators alike. And Minister, I want to believe that South Africa could not have maintained the record that it has on aviation safety and security if the regulator did not have the required capacity. That is our job, that is our mandate. So I'm not sure whoever that was perhaps inspecting the inspector, whether they are competent enough to even pronounce themselves on the capacity and the competence of the inspector from the South African Civil Aviation Authority. The Minister has indicated that we comply to international standards and recommended practices. Our inspectors, they go through a rigorous training process that is tested independently by the International Civil Aviation Organization, that is tested by the likes of the United States Federal Aviation Administration, and so on, without, having any evidence suggesting that any of our inspectors are incompetent. I cannot accept that anyone who's not even qualified to perform an inspection on our own inspectors can make a pronouncement and in fact cast a doubt that we have incompetent inspectors at the South African Civil Aviation Authority. They are adequately trained, Minister. They are appointed on the basis of their qualifications. These are not people who are taken from the street and be made to be inspectors. Firstly, they are professionals. They are aircraft maintenance engineers. They are pilots, qualified. They are air traffic controllers and so on. So they go through a robust training that is accepted worldwide. So until I receive any evidence suggesting that our inspectors are not qualified or unqualified, I cannot accept that assertion. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you so much, Ms. Tebe. You go, or we can go to the chair. Chair, you would like to add?
Yes, and I'm going to add by asking by responding to an unasked question. We were hoping we will get a question: Are we safe? Are we safe in the skies? And the answer is yes. So I want to just emphasize what the Minister has already alluded to, that we're safe, and the evidence is glaring in that for more than a quarter of a century, we have had zero fatalities on the civil aviation side. I also just want to emphasize that grounding, as the Minister indicated, happens occasionally. Why this raised eyebrows this time is because it happened at a scale larger than normal. But by and large, this is something that occurs from time to time, and SACAA, as the regulator, always executes its mandate without fear and favor. Thank you, Minister.
Okay.
Thank you so much. You have a follow-up? Yes.
Sorry, can I just
Could we get a handheld? Thank you.
Could I just... could I just clarify about that? You said 46 airplanes had been affected, but earlier the Minister said 25 SAA and then 12 Comair and 7 Mango, which is 44. But who are the other two? Or where'd you get the other two from to get to 46?
No, said 44.
Or is it 44?
25. Huh? 25, 14, and 7. So it's 25 SAA, 14 Comair, and 7 Mango.
Got you.
Maybe I got my maths wrong there.
No, my
Yeah.
maths. That's
Okay.
great. Thank
No,
you.
he was challenging my arithmetic,
Yeah, I didn't want to say this.
the study of numbers.
Thank you.
So Poppy is dealing with mathematics, the science of abstract thinking and quantities.
Thank you.
Just to add on the answers with regard to EWN, the reason why we are here, you may have all other issues that you want to raise, including to criticize SACAA and all of that. Well, it must be based on some evidence, and I don't think in this press conference we'll argue about that. We'll engage in practice about it. We're simply explaining the mandate of the South African Civil Aviation regulator under Department of Transport, and in terms of executing that particular mandate, what is actually expected. And it so happened that when all these things happen, it affects people who are traveling by air and using planes and all of that. And so we need to respond to that. And the EWN question, you are correct. We need to up our ante in terms of communication, but planes do get grounded for different reasons. And it happened this week in a massive scale. And also planes acting on precautionary, on their own, without being grounded by the SACAA. And that point has actually been explained. And we have explained in a transparent manner what actually happened since the reporting, and I think Poppy will also emphasize that point, to explain that since the report that came from the airline came up about bogus parts and all of that, that among others necessitated this. And you may also ask the question as to SACAA, it acts on the basis of the report, why and how does it actually operate at all material times. And I think I'll want her to deal with that so that there is absolute clarity. Gentlemen, when you were asking questions, please, you will be given a chance.
I've noted the two hands. Thank
You
you.
are intimidating. I mean, I'm not easily intimidated, but I just want order so that we give each other a chance. So note, I'm just trying to explain here the questions that have been explained. So I'm saying that in terms of communication, it is important that we must come to the fore and actually explain. It's not that SACAA is dramatic and acted without the interest of the people as such. But it had to happen in the manner in which it did, and explanation was made. And I think going forward, it will be important that communication is intensified. And we also thank you in terms of covering all these events and giving us space to explain what is happening. But it is upon us as practitioners, may it be the regulator and the operators, to explain to the passengers and the public so that there is no panic and frenzy out of control where people don't understand exactly what is happening. So everything is under control. We're acting in the best interest of our people, and all the other issues that have been identified technically in terms of the findings are being attended to. But the regulator, in terms of its mandate, must execute its mandate without fear or favor, irrespective of what happens. Because if it doesn't act, even though there is information either reported at Sunday Times or whatever newspaper, it will be oblivious and reckless on their part not to execute. And I think they will explain that point much better, also in terms of how do they actually act. I want to deal with Bloomberg, corruption and e-tolls once things are settled. Let's exhaust the issues that you want to. I think people are eager in terms of the subject at hand. Poppy, you want to add on what I said? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Minister. I think it's important to emphasize, again, as the Minister has articulated, based on the comment that either Civil Aviation Authority is dramatic or there are maintenance issues. We are in the business of safety and security. And the business of safety and security that involves passenger lives cannot be taken lightly. The Civil Aviation Authority does not have any friends where we are going to go and negotiate aviation safety and negotiate aviation security. I'm saying this because one of the so-called aviation experts has been saying on media that the Civil Aviation Authority should have had a cold coffee and biscuits and call those who are affected in a room and discuss the issues. You don't discuss aviation safety and security when there is an imminent danger at your doorstep. You act. And this is exactly what we do. We are firm, we are fair, and we act without fear or favor. Whether it is South African Airways, because I know the perception sometimes is that we're a public entity and therefore we are going to go easy on other public entities. That is not the case. You would know that last year alone we had 2 groundings. One involving a state-owned airline, SAA Express, and the other one involving a privately owned airliner, which is SACAA. When SAA Express was grounded, there was no noise. When SACAA was grounded, the Civil Aviation Authority is heavy-handed on a privately owned aircraft. South African Airways, we picked up issues at their technical maintenance provider. It's not the same narrative. As the Minister is saying, we execute our mandate without fear or favor because our interest is one. It's aviation safety and security, and that is non-negotiable. So we are not being dramatic. We are doing what we have to do on a daily basis. The only difference with this event of Tuesday and Wednesday is that there was a lot of inconveniences in the process, which are inherent if you are going to take the action that was taken. But I must indicate that it is by no coincidence that South Africa can enjoy a brilliant safety record, which fares favorably in the world, had it not been because our government took a decision many years ago to strengthen the institutions, establish them first, but ensure that they are functioning. Airlines have commercial interests, operators have their own commercial interests, but somebody has to oversee, to check that aviation safety and security is indeed upheld. And that is our primary mandate and nothing else. We are not a political institution. We are a government agency that has only one mandate, aviation safety and security, and we don't know anything else. The Minister raised an issue. Had it not been because of the Sunday Times article, would we have acted? The Civil Aviation Authority has a surveillance system where we must ensure that each and every operator that we license or that we issue approval to, on an ongoing basis, whether announced, unannounced, they get visited so that we do inspections and ensure that there is compliance with legislation. Equally, the Civil Aviation Authority, I'm sure some of the operators can attest to the fact that we've conducted road shows where we go to operators and we say, because we are not resident in your operations, if you do pick up suspicious issues that you want to report to the regulator. In fact, this information is on our website. We have a whistleblowing policy. Our whistleblowing policy is not only internal, but it also extends to operators. Tell us if you pick up something that you think could be a safety concern. So we do that on an ongoing basis. But equally, if there is an article published on a public newspaper, the Civil Aviation Authority will not pretend that they did not see that article. Because ours is aviation safety and security, we will always react. So there could be another one tomorrow that says another operator, there are problems. I can assure you we will follow up, because we cannot undermine the issues of passenger safety as well as to preserve the safety record that South Africa currently holds. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you so much. The two hands that I've seen, I will come to you very quickly. There's a third at the back there. This will be the last round of questioning, so I've noted you. But by way of contextualizing, perhaps let's also speak to infrastructure, which goes a long way to securing safety and security in as far as air traffic or air transportation is concerned. So to the CEO of ACSA, Ms. Sithebe, perhaps you can just also contextualize.
Thank you very much. And particularly, perhaps I can also respond to Bonga's question to say, how do we proactively manage such issues going forward? So at the forefront as Airports Company South Africa, we are also legislated by the Civil Aviation Authority, and underpinning our mandate is to ensure apron safety, runway safety, and passenger safety. So what does that mean? On a day-to-day basis, we have at the three big international airports, our airport management centers, which are like the hub, the nerve centers. These run on a day-to-day basis where there are airlines, ground handlers, the weather office, as well as ATNS. That essentially allows us to be able to work from the same version of the truth and understand the status at every given point within the same perspective. That in itself speaks to collaboration and seamless integration with our airlines. So from that perspective, we were able to immediately galvanize collaboration amongst the airport stakeholders from our perspective. And we were able to, similarly, we've got business continuity plans. You'll understand throughout a network of 9 airports, it's critical. And we were able to then draw in on the AMC. We're able to draw in on our business continuity planning, which tells us the processes, the systems that we need to immediately activate. So from that perspective, we were very proactive. And on the 22nd of October, there was an enhanced focus. We set up a command center where it was ourselves, the airline representatives, ground handlers, as well as ATNS. And from that perspective, we were able to minimize some of the disruptions, because the disruptions could have been far more wider reaching for the passenger at the airport. So I do want to confirm, I do want to reiterate that from an airport management perspective, we are very proactive in terms of disruptions are normal in aviation, but you just need to carefully plan for them and collaboratively integrate with the various stakeholders.
Thank you very much, sir. The last round of questioning. Athol, have you been answered, sir? No, not yet. Okay, there's a microphone.
I hear exactly what you're saying, Ms. Khoza. But the reality is, I serve on the board, not on the board, as a member of CASA, the Commercial Aviation Association. And you are aware that there's about 50 dossiers that were sitting on your desk of corrupt things that are happening, tea time rules, problems in the industry, in the commercial industry. Those dossiers now, because they were not answered by this SACAA, are now sitting on the Minister of Transport's desk. So when are we going to start addressing some of the issues that the industry is finding on a continual basis every single day?
Thank you. The gentleman just behind you also had a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Minister, this is actually directed at Poppy. Ms. Khoza, you mentioned that your mandate is pretty clear, and that you act without fear or favour, and you have to act swiftly. But there seems to be a bit of an inconsistency, because the South African Civil Aviation Authority never acted on the 737 MAX. In fact, it was left to the airline to determine the withdrawal from service. So please could you explain that? And also, just picking up on that, we've seen now news coming out of Indonesia on the Lion Air report and other civil aviation authorities around the world commenting on what they would require before allowing the aircraft back into service. So assuming that the CAA is in agreement with other aviation authorities, oversight authorities around the world, what is your position and what would you require before allowing that aircraft to return to service here? Secondly, you talked about reaction to the Sunday Times article. But predating the Sunday Times article was the Civil Aviation Authority's own preliminary report into a Mango incident. And in that report, the person who wrote the report for the Civil Aviation Authority made a note saying, we are unable to ascertain the service history of the component that failed and that was installed in the aircraft. Now, that suggests that you were aware of that information and aware of the deficiencies at least 2 weeks, if not more, before you did an inspection on the 12th of this month, because the Mango incident occurred at the beginning of September. So what was, was there any further action taken following that preliminary report, or did you wait until the Sunday Times appeared first?
Before you pass the microphone, sir, you didn't introduce yourself.
I beg your pardon. My name is Lyndon Burns. I'm with Plain Talking.
Thank you, Lyndon. Right there behind the cameras. Thank you, sir.
This is Angelo Coppola from China Global Television. I'm a newbie into this sector, so I have two questions, basically aimed at the authority. What sanction do you have now, and what sanction are you going to apply to those parties that didn't meet the requirements of your regulatory environment? And how far are you going to push this? Just a follow-up to that, when was the last mass grounding of this size in South African airspace? We're talking 44 planes.
Thank you. There's a lady behind the camera there.
Hi, it's Joyce Summers from Carte Blanche. A few months ago, there were reports of the CAA losing information through a hacking attack. My question is, sorry, I'm hearing myself. My question is to you, what? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, ma'am.
Oh, my question to you is, has the CAA managed to retrieve all this information? Because we've been receiving allegations that the CAA has lost a huge amount of data. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Last hand, right at the back, please.
Leolam Kendane from Business Day newspaper. Just a quick question to the authority. Do you know why the component that was fitted on the Mango plane failed? Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, I believe that is the last round of questions. We're happy. There we go. Ms. Kwaza, perhaps you can take the bulk of them, and then the other colleagues can speak to those questions. Minister, I'm going to ask for you to wrap for us once all the answers have been given. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start with the issue of dossiers. I don't have 50 dossiers on my table. So I don't know what kind of dossiers I thought you would be referring to, but I'll be happy to engage with you after this meeting. I wasn't aware that you sit at the board of CASA. Now I do know. But we engage actively and very well with the CEO of CASA on an ongoing basis about any matter. I'm sure the dossier that you are referring to is an outdated dossier that relates to the remotely piloted aircraft systems, which dossier I'm sure if you go back to CASA if you were to go back to CASA to confirm, I'm sure CASA, I don't have to confirm it, CASA will be able to confirm to you that majority of those issues were attended to. It was just one dossier, which by and large was misinformation, perhaps based on miscommunication. So I'll throw it back to you to go back to CASA and confirm with your colleagues there. I'm sure they will be able to update you about the status quo. The second issue that was raised by Lyndon, CAA never acted on the MAX. Some of these things are not public, Lyndon, and you will have an appreciation that it's only 2 airlines who had purchased those aircraft at the time and operating them in the South African airspace, and that was Ethiopian Airlines, as well as COMAIR. We didn't have to do much because COMAIR, when the story was developing, and remember, none of those accidents happened in South Africa. But of course, we were engaging with the manufacturer because we were in a process of receiving these aircraft. In fact, we had just taken delivery of one. Many other airlines were reacting, grounding these aircraft, or the fleet, on the basis that it wasn't clear as to what was the issue. Even now, the investigation, as far as I remember, is not yet concluded. And therefore, you don't just jump and take decisions when you are still engaging and you don't have credible information at your disposal. But what we were very pleased about was that COMAIR elected, without the CAA's influence, to take their own precautionary measures, which is what we advocate as a Civil Aviation Authority. Airlines don't have to wait for the regulator to ground when they can self-ground, which is precisely what happened in the past few days. And we commended that. In fact, we were out on the media confirming and in fact appreciating that COMAIR, who was the only South African operator who had taken delivery of that aircraft. So there could not have been any expectation for us to do much when the aircraft is already grounded by the airliner who was operating it. We are in constant, Boeing has a task team. We participate in ongoing discussions, and therefore we are watching developments because this is an aircraft that is manufactured in the US by an aircraft manufacturer, and at that time, US FAA took a decision to ground all of them, so those aircraft are not operating. We are continuing to watch developments as any other countries to see, the MAX going back to service after, of course, a robust certification process. There was an issue about the Sunday Times. I think you raised an issue about that a preliminary report indicated that we were unable to ascertain the part. I cannot pronounce on a preliminary report because that one is independently done outside of the regulatory process. There is an independent arm which reports directly to the Department of Transport, that is accident and incident investigation. I'm sure the information would have changed because that was preliminary. But subsequently, that report, you will be receiving the updates in terms of the new developments. When was the last mass grounding in South Africa? I did indicate that last year we had 2 groundings. Of course, they are small operators compared to what we see them, what we saw in the past few days. But I must emphasize, again, this was not the CAA grounding. It was the airlines who decided to take precautionary measures and self-grounded their own aircraft. So this was not done by the South African Civil Aviation Authority, but we applaud it because if an airline operator in their own verification checks pick up things that make them to be unsettled, if they decide to put those aircraft on the ground on account of safety, we can only be happy that airlines are indeed able to self-correct themselves. The other issue was the issue on hacking. We had an incident in July this year, cybersecurity incident, which is not unique to the South African Civil Aviation Authority. I'm sure if you follow the news, British Airways had a massive hacking. The banks, they go through that all the time, ransomwares and so on. But I can indicate to you that information through our business continuity plans and the backup systems that we have, we did not lose the amount of information that you mentioned. We are still recovering some of the information from our own backups, and that takes a while because we keep data from 1998 to date, and therefore to run those backups, it can take a while. There's been no disruption on services as a result of that incident because it was handled promptly, and we ensured that there was a business continuity. So I'm not aware of the mass loss of information, perhaps, that you could have. Safe to say that constantly we're updating the information, it keeps coming back, and so on. I think those were the only questions. I hope I did not...
The sanctions, the last question from Linda, I believe it was? No, it was
The
not.
mango, I think I covered that.
From China, the sanctions.
Angelo,
Will there be any sanctions?
Oh, will there be any sanctions? I apologize. Of course, we take enforcement action. As I'm speaking with you now, the enforcement action is going on. So it's just that it's not public. In the recent past, we've grounded SAA aircraft. Perhaps some of you won't know. I think in less than 2 years ago, I think about 11 aircraft, if I'm not mistaken, but it didn't make to the media because the airline was able to, through their own contingencies, continue with business. But it happens all the time, almost on a daily basis.
What kind of sanctions?
There are fines. We issue fines. We ground. We revoke licenses, and so on. So pretty much it can be. We can issue fines. We can issue prohibition orders for an amount of time until such time you've corrected what you need to correct, and we are happy. We can take away your license for a number of years, or we can cancel your license altogether. It differs on each circumstance. But all these things are equally regulated. So it's not someone who will wake up, one morning and decides that I don't like that one, so I'm going to go and remove the license. It goes through a process. And remember, our actions are subject to independent, judiciary process. Our actions can be challenged even in a court of law. So whatever that we do, it must be consistent with our own regulations. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. COO, I believe you're covered. Chair, are you happy? Can we ask Minister to close? Thank you so much. Honourable Minister, it's over to you, sir.
1, 2. I think this is a public matter in as far as it affects the passengers in the Republic of South Africa and the operations of our airlines. And it was important for us to clarify and bring you up to speed that things are back to normal, but where there are occurrences that there is a follow-up on some of the airlines, those will be done by the regulator and the operators. So it is not something that people must perceive as something that cannot happen. It does happen. However, the frenzy that comes with it must be explained. And we want to thank all South Africans for their patience and also for their understanding that all of these have got to happen. But now I think going on, as you would have seen from this press conference, there's a whole lot of other issues that people will raise for varied interest. We engage with those issues in the context of the regulator on a daily basis. So today we're dealing with a public matter. Like any other entity that interacts and deals with enforcement of regulations, it will always face opposition and it will always be challenged. But the most important thing is to engage and explain all of this. And the responsibility of SACAA in terms of our legislations in the context of aviation is very important for our citizens. The last point that I want to say is that, of course, where there is corruption, we need to deal with it. And that's why we referred to that. And the e-tolls and the Gauteng freeway improvement program, we will pronounce on that in the next coming week. I know that people are marching, they've got all sorts of pronouncements, but it's important as South Africa that we need to move towards a consensus. Our economy is bleeding. We've got a debt to service. It's not as easy as scratch, hack, and go. It doesn't work like that. We may not please other people, unions, the working class, and everybody, but we need a consensus. We need a consensus for the sake of our country and economy. And the most important thing here is that these issues, they become lost if they are elevated to ideological, political issues. But we need to deal with the real economics and not fudge issues and bring rumor mongering and all of that. And let's deal with the real issues. And that is why we don't step back, we move in and explain, because people elected government, they did not elect Poppy. If flights are grounded, you blame it on government disorganization. We've got the responsibility to explain to you and to the public that why are planes grounded, why penalties are imposed, and why there is a regulator to oversee the operation of planes. It was reported in a big article that there are bogus parts that have been sourced in terms of dealing with mechanical problems in our airlines. The regulator has got to oversee and investigate that. Because one day, once a big accident happens, they're going to say, I'm sorry, the men from China, they're going to say, are those parts from China? Because everything is everything that is not, patented in the first grade is from China. But we have looked into that. Those things have been attended to. But thank you to everybody and the media for keeping us on our toes. It's not praising you, because sometimes when we're too comfortable in our positions, we make mistakes. But you've got to keep asking the hard questions. And so that even these entities we run, they are held accountable. So if Poppy is in some corner there in the board and everybody, they are having a lot of fun and nobody questions them, this country will be a banana republic. And we're not running a banana republic. We're running a serious country here, and which is recognized in the world out of its own accolades. And we've got men and women which we believe have got integrity in the work that they do. And that is what is important. On that note, I want to recognize the Director General of Transport, Mr. Alec Muemi, with a red tie. Can you please stand up, please, DG? And so on. He was busy this morning, and so he couldn't join us here in the front, but he was busy doing some work, so I dragged him to come to the fore. But nonetheless, thank you very much for your time, and let's keep engaging. If you've got any other question, you may want to ask. Technical issues, SACAA are very much there to answer your questions. From the department, we thank everybody. Everything is back to normal, not 100%, but we can fly. And like the chair said, not me, you are safe. And then I also want to echo that with the work that we're doing, we keep working hard to ensure that South Africa maintains the safety position and all our citizens are safe in our planes. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Honourable Minister. Just by way of announcement, colleague, we're not going to be able to do one-on-ones. The Minister is not running away. He's got another engagement, AviaFreak, the Innovation Summit. If you would like, you can follow him there and see if there's an opportunity. So he is on his way there at the moment. It is in 4 ways. For more information, you can contact myself. SA to my colleagues there. SA to Nawe Wave. We've got Betty from AXA, who's also here to assist. And there's also Pindile from SACAA, who's able to help. If you have any follow-up questions, myself and the team are here to assist you. I'm going to ask that we kindly release the Minister and the heads of entities, because as I mentioned, they have to rush. Very quickly, the hard copy of the Minister's address is at the table to my left. It will be your right. You can collect the hard copy. You can also give them your parking ticket. Exchange the parking ticket that you have. They will give you one that will allow you out. Thank you very much for coming. Those who want to shoot further than 11:30, remember, you've been given permission only until 11:30. It is a national key point. Should you want to stay longer, you need to ask for permission. My colleague over there is going to be able to help you if you're going to be staying, getting overlay and other shots a little bit longer. Thank you very much for coming and have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you. We leave.